All right, Joe, welcome to the next installment of Right Triangle Trig. Whoops, my triangle just went away. All right, what we're going to focus on today is finding an angle measure, right? So what we've been working on a week is setting up the triangle, labeling the sides, and then we went through and saying, all right, which one would we pick out? Well, this is opposite and hypotenuse, so that's the sine. We would set up our equation. We've been practicing solving for a side length. Today we're going to set up and solve for an angle. Today is super easy. What you need to do is get that fraction good to go, and then it's buttons in the calculator. Right? There's not a whole lot of solving we have to do. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is know how to use our calculator. All right. So again, SOHCAHTOA. That's just the acronym to help us remember sine, opposite, and hypotenuse, cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent, opposite over adjacent, right? So that's what we've been working on. Again, just another time to see that in our head, to try to solidify that in our brain a little bit. So what you need to do is look for the shift or the second button. Might be an arrow key, so I'll show you guys what those might look like on certain calculators. But the idea of what we're going to try to do is we have an equation now where we have the sine of an angle is equal to 0.2250, or back on the first day of this, we had the cosine of our angle. You know, we were finding sine of A, cosine of A, tangent of A, and then we had to flip-flop and do sine of B, cosine of B, tangent of B. We had fractions that look like this, okay? What we're going to do now is we are solving for our angle. We want to find out what that angle is. So in order to do that, we have to get rid of it, right? Cosine is a function. It's an operation. We're doing something to a number, right? So just like when we did x squared last unit, we took the square root. The square and the square root cancel each other out. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what we call the I can't really see that. We're going to do what we call the inverse trig function. So if it's sine, we're going to do the sine inverse, or sine -1, cosine, cosine inverse, tangent, tangent inverse, undo each other. Okay, so we're going to use that. So let's just practice using that in our calculator. So if you have Desmos, so if you don't have a TI-84 or a nice scientific calculator, Desmos is the way to go, right? So how am I going to type this in? Down in the bottom right, you have functions. You want to make sure you're on the trig. The sine, cosine, tangent are on the left. The sine inverse, cosine inverse, tangent inverse are in the middle. So we would hit the sine inverse of 0.2250. And that gives us 13.00 something, right? So we're just going to call that roughly 13 degrees. Okay? If you're using the calculator on your iPad, don't do it. I've been having issues with this thing. Make sure you hit the all clear a bunch of times, right? So we would do 0.2250, and then the arrow on the bottom left is the one that we want to change. So instead of sine being on the bottom, we want the sine -1 on the bottom. We hit that, you get 13.00. If you're using this, again, I've had issues with this calculator. You need to make sure you are all clearing, and make sure it's cleared out. And that seems to work the best, okay? So go ahead, practice the sines, the cosines, and the tangents, and you're just doing sine inverse, cosine inverse, tangent inverse, okay? So just practice plugging them into your in your calculator. Pause the video. Make sure you're getting 13, 56, 82. Again, I'm rounding those to the nearest degree, okay? And then here are the answers for cosine. Again, make sure you're getting the answers. It's not, it's just practice using the calculator. That's all we're doing. And here's tangent. All right. So go ahead, pause the video, try that out. What we're going to do is we're going to set up now. Here's my angle. Kind of find angle B. So label that triangle according to angle B: opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. If they give you all three sides, then you can choose sine, cosine, or tangent. Doesn't matter, right? This one is specifically opposite and hypotenuse. So we're going to set up an equation using sine. So we're going to say sine of B is equal to 8 over 13. Right? So we're just picking out the trig function. And then now we want to solve for the angle, so what we're going to do is do the sine inverse. All right, we would do the sine inverse on both sides. So we would say angle B is equal to the sine inverse of 8 over 13. Okay, we type that in the calculator. Well, if you got a calculator like Desmos, again, super nice. All right, we would do sine inverse of 8 over 13. We get 37.97, so that's 38 degrees. If you're going to use the iPad calculator, you're going to do 8 divided by 13 first, equals, and then we're going to do the sine inverse and get 37.97, which is 38 degrees. Okay. If you have a TI-84 calculator, you would just do sine inverse, much like you would type it into the Desmos. Okay. All right, so let's go through this one. Pause the video. I want you to do sine, cosine, tangent. Or sorry, pick out the trig function. So label it, pause the video, try it out. Opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. They give us adjacent hypotenuse, which is cosine. So the cosine of A is equal to 12 over 17. Type that into the calculator. Cosine inverse of 12 divided by 17. Okay, I struggled there for a second. I had to clear my calculator out, my personal one. And we get 45.09, so we're going to say that's, so we're doing cosine inverse of 12 over 17 is equal to A. A is equal to 45 degrees, roughly 45 degrees, okay? And last but not least, this is opposite and hypotenuse, or adjacent, sorry, not hypotenuse, which is tangent, TOA, right? So tangent of B is equal to opposite over adjacent. So angle B is going to equal the tangent inverse of 7 over 2. Again, the only time we're using that inverse function is when we're solving for an angle, when we're actually getting the angle. Tangent inverse of 7 halves is 74.05, or 74 degrees. Okay, so we are doing the sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse when we are solving for an angle measure, right? Then how would we get the third angle measure? So if this was 74 degrees, how do I find this one? Hint, hint, triangles add up to 180, so you don't have to set up another trig function for that, okay? So set up your ratio, sine inverse, cosine inverse, tangent inverse to solve for the angle.